A new area of interest was designated this morning in the main development region. There, conditions seem to be somewhat favorable for quick tropical development happening soon. The tropical wave is expected to emerge off the coast of Africa on Tuesday, and from then on out, things start ramping up from there. But what is the ceiling of this situation? How strong could this get, and could anyone be impacted by this tropical wave? In this video, we're going to be going over everything that you need to know about this new area of development. Let's dive right into this. The National Hurricane Center this morning designated an area of interest for the first time in a while out in the main development region. We're going to be talking about that today. We're also going to be talking about the conditions and the modeling to see what the potential ceiling for this is and if anyone could see any genuine impacts. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So here is your National Hurricane Center map right here. Here is our area of interest in the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. Let's go ahead and read this out for you guys right here. A tropical wave is expected to move off the west coast of Africa on Tuesday. Some development of this system will be possible during the middle to latter part of next week while it moves westward across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days, 0% in the next 48 hours. I gotta tell you this, we were talking about this on the Triple P show last night. LTW actually called this out on the show, and he was spot on with its placement and the chances of it as well. This is actually our second tropical wave that we're paying attention to from the NHC. It's the second wave that we talked about from yesterday. The first one is currently over the water right now. The second one is emerging in the next few days. So we're going to want to keep a very close eye on things, and we're going to want to monitor the situation as it progresses. But starting off, here is the ensembles, starting with the European, then we're going to go to the rest of them, and then just go from there. We're going to zoom in to parts of the, actually, we're not going to zoom in parts of the MDR. We're going to stay on the full Atlantic covering of this, just so that way we get a full grasp as to what we're paying attention to. And let's go ahead and get started 24 hours out. You have your couple of areas right here paying attention to that. I believe this is actually one signal right here. There's just a bit of a split on where it actually starts. And then as we go ahead, we'll go ahead and go to 72 hours out starting here. 72 hours out is when things start getting a little interesting. This is around the time when you start seeing that tropical waves emerging off the coast of Africa. At this current point, you have your signals starting to pop up over here. You're starting to see some things starting to ramp up across much of the main development region. The first area is expected to move further to the west and head potentially towards the Lesser Antilles. It's definitely something that I am keeping an eye on and something I am watching in case this system does actually develop or cause some impacts for you guys over there. But from what I've seen, at least for the first wave, the power signals and the power numbers on it have definitely dropped according to the ensembles. Not just the European, but a lot of the ensembles have started to see a dip in power based on the splashdown effect that we saw earlier. Let's go ahead and go to 4 days out. This is that signal right here that we're paying attention to. This is Tuesday night, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tuesday at 7 p.m. This is when the tropical wave emerges. You have the system already just showing a lot of ensemble signal right here. I will tell you this, in my opinion, from what I have seen, I don't think it's going to develop right away. I think we're being a little bit aggressive based on what we're seeing on current satellite right now, and I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But what we see over satellite, according to what we see, especially over the coast of Africa, especially over the Sahel region, is you have that big blow up of convection. That is land-based convection. Water-based convection is different, and the reason you see this massive drop-off in that splashdown effect when the system emerges off of land is because it needs to take its time to adjust to the water temperatures, and it needs to take time to adjust to start using the evaporative water to start producing new convection. That, or it has to attach to the intertropical convergence zone. So that's kind of why I'm a bit skeptical of this just starting to blow up and develop right away. NHC is kind of in agreement with that as well. They're waiting for this to pass the Cabo Verde Islands before starting to get its act together. So let's just go ahead and give you an example of this. So we covered this on the Triple P show last night, but I'm also going to give a brief overview of what we were seeing. I know Delta absolutely pointed this out, but we'll go ahead and max out the frames and it'll show you what we're looking at. So you have this tropical wave right here, for example. You have this wave, looks really good on paper. You're seeing a lot of convection blowing up with it, especially as it approaches the western coast of Africa. Over here as it approaches Senegal, Guinea, and all those areas over there, southern Mauritania. But then as you start losing that land-based convection, as this tropical wave starts emerging in the water, you start seeing a lot of that convection tapering off right here. You're not seeing that cold convection that you were seeing previously. A lot of the convection in the next few hours actually dies off over here. That's because you're losing your land-based convection. That's because you have a situation where you have to adjust to your water right here to move forward. This area of convection has started to adjust to water temperature convection. This area is just moving off of land, so it's kind of fizzling out a little bit. But by and large, you are starting to see some of that convection starting to pump out and start seeing more of that water-based convection. That's going to be rather key, in my opinion, to what we see with this tropical wave coming off, if this continues to hold and if we start seeing more activity going on in the MDR. But let's go ahead and shift back to the ensembles. Let's go ahead and go to 5 days out. So this will be late Wednesday from what I'm seeing, because this initialized at the 0Z. That's about 7 o'clock Central Time in the United States. But looking at what we got right here, our signal over here starts to slowly get its act together. The power numbers already, according to the European, are starting to show just a little bit at this current point. The Western signal, though, does start to fade and weaken by a pretty significant margin, as a matter of fact. And that continues to get exacerbated 6 days out. You're starting to see more of the signal really starting to ramp up and really starting to head further to the west. This is when you're starting to see your most agreement from the modeling that the system could develop. And this is why the NHC designated this area in the main development region an area of interest. They're looking at the same thing we are, and they're going, okay, it's going to take its time. It's going to slowly get its act together. But once it gets to this region right here, this is where the conditions are going to be the most favorable. And this is where this convection is going to start potentially going off. We're going to want to keep an eye on this. We're going to want to pay attention to it. Let's go ahead now and go another 24 hours out and show you what's going on there. What you're noticing from there is a lot of the signals that I am seeing are starting to make a bit of a shift towards the north. I talked about it in yesterday's video. If this system wants to survive longer, it's going to have to stay out of the Caribbean graveyard and go further to the north into parts of the Atlantic Basin. We're going to want to monitor that, see how that will ultimately progress, and especially as we go towards 8 days out, you're definitely starting to see a bit of an increase of the power numbers as this starts heading towards the Atlantic Basin. This is when you're going to start tapping into that bigger OHC. The only problem I have here is there's going to be wind shear that may inhibit this. So we'll have to monitor it and see how this will progress. But ultimately, it's a situation where the power numbers start to increase. You have things starting to ramp up and things starting to go off over here in parts of the Western MDR. And as we go ahead and go to 9 days out, the power numbers really start to ramp up as the system especially shifts further up to the north and starts to curve out to sea for the most part from what I'm seeing. And then as we go ahead and go to 10 days out from the Euro, the power definitely continues to increase. This is definitely a more so of a power signal. If it lasts that long, it's probably going to be more of a powerful system. If it can get past that wind shear, it'll have better conditions ahead of it, and it'll be a situation that we're going to want to monitor kind of closely for the Atlantic. That's the European. What are some of the ensembles otherwise showing? And here is the European AI run. Here's the 0Z. Not nearly as aggressive in terms of the pop like the European is showing. They're showing a lot more power, which is rather uncharacteristic, especially compared to the GFS. The GFS is the one that usually ramps it up in terms of its potential power, its potential intensity as well. This year, it's kind of the European. It was a similar situation to 2024 from what I've seen, but the European AI is like, okay, we're seeing the same thing you are, European, but we don't think it's going to be as strong. We don't see really the big amount of power that you're seeing, but we will keep an eye on it. Here's the GFS for context. GFS, very strong signal, rather strong signal across much of the main development region. It's not as powerful as the European, but it is still a potential tropical storm candidate from what I am seeing with the ensembles. Let's go ahead and go back to about 6 days out to show this. Yeah, that signal really starts to pop up and really starts to ramp. The GFS is also pretty trigger happy with this signal further to the west. I'm a little bit skeptical with that based on the fact that the European's starting to weaken it and the fact that it's not looking that best on satellite. But overall, the second signal over here is what the GFS is absolutely looking at. I will say this though, this system is not over water yet. It's not going to be over water for the next few days. So if you do see a dip in the power numbers, especially on the European side when it splashes down, don't be surprised. Don't say it's going to downtrend or anything like that. The reason I say that is because that's what's known as splashdown effect. It has an effect on the models. And what happens going on then is either it kind of stays around what it does post splashdown effect and it kind of stays in that intensity, or it starts ramping back up in intensity like we've seen in previous years. Something to keep in mind, something to pay attention to. Let's look at the AI runs. And here is the Google DeepMind. The Google DeepMind is absolutely loving the second area right here. They're actually predicting this to be tropical storm strength from what I'm seeing. It is expected to develop relatively quickly once it gets its act together southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. This is 6 days out. What are we looking in the next 48 hours? The Google DeepMind in the last 24 hours went from, we're not seeing too much to, hey, we're seeing some stuff here, and there's actually a little bit of power associated with this too. We're looking at least tropical storm strength. A couple of hurricane ensembles are in there as well. But the power numbers, according to the Google DeepMind, have really gone up. Let's go ahead and check the 12Z from yesterday for context. Yeah, much bigger of an uptrend according to the AI runs. So I think that's what the NHC was waiting for from what I've been seeing. And that's what the NHC was waiting for to go, okay, we're going to designate this an area of interest. The DeepMind is starting to go off on this. The European's definitely going off on this. Let's go ahead and designate this an area of interest. We've looked at the conditions. It seems like we're all on the same page here. Let's go ahead and cross-check this with the GENC. GENC is the only model that's not really showing much, but the Google DeepMind, big power numbers compared to what we've seen previously, and we're going to want to watch that and see how things progress. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. We have to look at the operational runs and kind of dissect what's going on with them. And starting off, we'll go with our trusty dusty European right here. I'm going to go ahead and kind of break this down and save us a little time. I'm going to go over the European run, and then I'm going to go over some of the conditions that it's seeing to kind of back up the support. So let's go ahead and get started with the European operational and go, okay, what's exactly going to happen here? And then as time goes on, we're going to go ahead and go to Tuesday. You start seeing the system emerge off the coast of Africa. The European at 0Z kind of backing off from what we saw with the 18Z with it developing right away. It's going to take its time to organize and develop. European has the system developing south of the Cabo Verde Islands and then starting to move further to the west. You do have a bit of a low pressure system right here over in parts of the southwestern parts of where this low is going to be. That might cause a bit of a problem. That might cause some disorganization issues right here as time continues to go on. That is going to be definitely an intriguing situation if that stretches the vorticity out and potentially weakens and kind of kills it off a little bit. This is honestly right here, this from what I've seen is kind of giving me Invest 91L vibes a little bit, but I'm not going to necessarily say that this is going to happen again. I'm just looking at this and I'm going, yeah, it looks like that vorticity starts stretching out a little bit from what I've seen. So that's the European. It moves further towards the Atlantic Basin. It does reorganize, does remain a relatively good low throughout its lifetime as it starts heading towards the subtropical Atlantic, but by and large, it starts weakening from that point, and that's the last we will hear of that. Let's look at some of the conditions and kind of diagnose what is the European seeing and what can we kind of give an idea of what may be happening. To start off, here is our wind shear, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go ahead and go to Tuesday night as the system starts emerging off the coast of Africa. You do start seeing a bit of an increase of wind shear further to the west over here, but that wind shear increase appears from what I've seen to be at least temporary, at least in the existing area just surrounding it. The area a bit further to the north, yes, there's going to be some shear, a little bit of shear too to the south, but if it can stay in the kind of pocket sandwich between those two areas, it won't necessarily have too big of a problem initially. It is going to be battling some of it as it moves further to the west, and especially if that area of vorticity kind of stretches and starts to cause it to weaken and start to kind of deorganize it, you're going to have a scenario where that's going to cause some issues, especially as it starts running into the shear by the time we get to August 15th. Yeah, the conditions start to deteriorate a little bit, but by the time we get to 10 days out, if the European holds that long, and this is part of the reason why the power numbers actually go up once it gets this far out, because the wind shear weakens by a pretty significant margin, and then it starts moving a bit further up to the north. Then it runs right into the jet stream over here, the Canadian and New England area over here in the United States, and then starts to weaken and go from there. So that's kind of what we're looking at with our wind shear map. Let's go ahead and see what the moisture is looking like as well. This is probably going to be our greatest challenge. You have a lot of Sahara air layer still in parts of the main development region. Yes, more of it has been slowly but surely moving towards Europe, but there's still a significant amount of dry air going on across much of the MDR. There is a moisture pocket that the system's going to be kind of populating. It's also where this area of vorticity a bit to the southwest is going to be populating as well. It's a situation that we're going to want to pay attention to and keep a close eye on. Initially, it looks like it's going to have a decent shot at good tropical development based on the shear and the moisture pocket. But as time progresses, as it moves further to the west and starts running into that wind shear a bit further to the west in the main development region, you're going to have a scenario where ultimately that wind shear starts to chip away at the structure, and the dry air entrainments start to come in and come on knocking through right there. That happens for a little while until we get to about 10 days out, but even then, there's still just massive amounts of dry air going on across much of the system right here. I'm not sure how that's going to progress and how that's going to pan out, but that's going to kill any tropical development right there, and we'll have to see how that progresses. But ultimately, when this system emerges off the coast of Africa, it's probably going to have a 5-day window of tropical development before things start to deteriorate in terms of conditioning. So that's what we're seeing, at least with the basic conditions. Water temperatures are going to be absolutely warm regardless, so that's just something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead now and next pull up the GFS, and then we'll pull up the Canadian and then the icon and go on from there. Here is your GFS. The 12Z GFS is actually starting to come out a little bit. I'll go ahead and just talk about the 0Z first, and then we'll go to the GFS just to see if anything has shifted. Here is your 0Z GFS. The GFS is interestingly still wanting a more double barrel situation, kind of what the Canadian has been forecasting, with the first wave organizing and developing into a tropical storm at least before heading towards the Caribbean and weakening due to wind shear. And the GFS wants the second system to slowly get its act together, start organizing and potentially developing, reaching tropical storm strength by the time we get to August 14th over here. But as it starts running into the wind shear, actually it does start to get up to a strong tropical storm strength, potentially around 1,002 millibars, with it being a strong system, small system as a matter of fact. And then as time progresses, it starts running into the shear and starts weakening and getting more disorganized, and that's the last we will hear of that according to the GFS right here. But that's kind of a curious shift from what we've seen previously with the GFS. The operational runs are catching up to the ensembles, and this continues to show. Let's go ahead and pull up the 12Z GFS just to show some more context to see how things are going to progress. Here's the first area of interest right here. The 12Z GFS still has it developing, albeit remaining a lot weaker from what we've saw previously at the 0Z. And then the 12Z GFS going on here, you're looking at 1,007 millibars. Pretty decent structure in my opinion from what I'm seeing. Compare that to the 0Z. Let's take a quick gander about it. Slightly weaker at the 12Z compared to what we've seen at the 0Z. So we'll have to monitor it and see how things will progress. But they're still there, still calling for that development. We're going to have to keep an eye on it for right now. Let's go ahead and pull up the Canadian. Here is the Canadian run right here. Let's go ahead and go to the 0Z right here. Still calling for that double barrel situation. Getting to strong tropical storm strength, the Canadian is, with that first area that we're looking at in terms of that tropical wave. I'm a bit skeptical on that personally. We'll have to see how things progress. But here's what we have going on with the second one. The Canadian actually doesn't have it as strong as the first one, which I do find kind of interesting, to say the very least. We'll have to wait and see how things are going, because there is still a little bit of uncertainty in regards to how the wind shear is going to impact it and how the dry air, at least in the long run, when the system moves into the central and western MDR is going to impact it as well. So we'll have to monitor this. We'll have to keep a very close eye on it. I know I've said this a lot already in today's video, but it's kind of a fluid situation that we're going to want to watch out for. It's not as cut and dry as what we would typically see around this time of the year, typically in the tropics. And lastly, let's go ahead and go to the icon, even though it's iconic for not being right a lot of the time. Yes, I'm making icon jokes. What are you going to do about it? So here is the icon that we have pulled up for you guys right here. As time continues to progress, the first wave doesn't really show too much. The 0Z for the second wave, on the other hand, is showing potentially organization and development, albeit it remains relatively weak, as it actually moves further to the south and heads potentially towards the Caribbean as it slowly starts to get its act together. 1008 millibar system, as it starts moving towards potentially the Leeward Islands if it continues on that route. That said, this is where the model maxes out in terms of its time, so we can't exactly see where it's going to be going moving forward, but we can make a bit of an inference. And I just want to cross-check this with the 12Z as well. Here's what we have with the 12Z run. That first wave isn't really showing too much. The icon is actually very aggressive with the second wave, as a matter of fact, with it actually developing off parts of the coast of Africa, south of the Cabo Verde Islands, and starting to make its own way and start moving towards the main development region, actually staying north of this area of Vorticity over here, which I do think is kind of interesting. So it's kind of showing what the European is showing, but because the system is so small, it kind of just ignores it altogether, at least until it's too late. And then you have the 1007 millibar system starting to kind of just start to absorb it a little bit, which, okay, at that current point, I'm not really buying the icon too much. This is why it's iconic for not getting things right. Yes, I know I'm making a lot of icon jokes. A lot of people have been commenting that I make a lot of icon jokes. This is why I make these icon jokes, ladies and gentlemen. With that being said, and kind of my mini crash out done, let's go ahead and get to the other conditions real quickly and just kind of dissect those before I start losing my head a little bit. Here is our water temperatures for you guys across much of the Atlantic. So this is the situation that we have going on and what's progressing. 28 degrees Celsius water temperatures, 82 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who do not use the metric system. That's kind of all you need to know in terms of your water temps. Plenty warm for development. If a system wants to get its act together, it probably is going to want to do it quickly. And the reason it's going to want to do it quickly is because of the shear and the dry air aspect of it. The water temperatures, plenty warm for that. The question is can it take advantage of that, and can it take advantage of the convection it has ahead of it? If it can do either of those things and pump out the warm water and use it to its advantage, it'll have a pretty good shot, in my opinion, at tropical development. In terms of what we're seeing with the ocean heat content, it's not as extreme, I would say. You're looking at OHC values around 25 to 50. You're not seeing too much OHC in this part of the Atlantic. But part of the reason the Europeans' power numbers increase the further out you go is because of all this OHC in the Atlantic Basin. You increase from 50 to 75 to up to 100 in a few areas in this part of the basin. That's why you're seeing your power numbers increase according to the European ensemble. That said, we'll have to keep an eye on how things will progress, but by and large, things are getting more interesting across much of the main development region, and we'll continue to keep you updated. We'll continue to watch how things will progress, and we'll continue to monitor the situation here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we are going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.